Aunt Claire, Mom and Grandma are going to take everything from you tonight, whispered Lily. Her voice was barely audible, just a fragile breath against my shoulder as she leaned in during the backyard party. She didn't look scared, just tired like she had been carrying that secret too long for someone her age. And in that moment, the blood in my veins turned cold. I had spent the past year caring for my father, keeping his business alive, while he recovered from a stroke, sacrificing my career, my time, my entire life. And now apparently my own mother and older sister had plans to strip me of the one thing I'd earned my rightful place in this family. I looked across the lawn where the two of them stood by the patio glasses of white wine in hand, laughing a little too loudly at a joke I hadn't heard. My sister Rachel, ever the golden child, and my mother Susan, the iron matriarch who thought silence was a form of control. I had been here before on the sidelines, dismissed, pitied. But today felt different. Today they were nervous, too accommodating, too, watchful. Rachel had sent me 3 reminder texts about this party. My mother insisted I wear something presentable, as if I hadn't been running the company in their absence for the past 9 months. And then Lily's words, so simple, so devastating, cut through every rationalization I'd been holding on to. I knew Rachel had been pressuring Dad to review the company shares. I knew she and Mom had visited the family lawyer behind my back. But I hadn't let myself believe the worst. Not until Lily confirmed it. Tonight, they were going to try to take it all. My name, my work, my future. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. Not anymore. My name is Claire Harper. I'm 32, single, and until last year I was a rising star in interior design. I had a steady stream of high-end clients in Austin, a small team of assistants, and a 2-bedroom apartment filled with light and quiet. That all ended the morning Dad collapsed in his office at Harper & Daughters Construction. A stroke, they said. He survived, but his speech was slurred and his right hand barely worked. I dropped everything, clients, projects, my life, to come back to Cedar Ridge and take care of him. I moved into my childhood home, the one Rachel moved out of at 18, and never looked back. It wasn't a decision I made out of guilt. It was love, plain and simple. My father, Raymond Harper, built the company from a rusted pickup truck and raw grit. He taught me how to read blueprints before I could drive. He named the company after me and Rachel before we were even old enough to understand what concrete did. And while Rachel climbed the corporate ladder in Houston and Mom spent her time in social clubs, I stayed with Dad through the worst of it. I handled invoices, soothed panicked clients, and supervised construction sites even when I didn't know a damn thing about plumbing permits. I figured it out because he needed me. And the truth, I was good at it. The team respected me. Subcontractors called me first. Within months, I became the de facto manager. And when Dad regained enough strength to hold a pen, he added me to the company's ownership documents. 50% his way of saying thank you, and maybe even passing the torch. Mom didn't say much when she found out. Rachel didn't speak to me for 3 weeks. She said it was unfair that I was manipulating Dad while he was weak. That she was the one with the MBA, the one who knew how to scale a business, who had sacrificed her relationship with the company to make real money elsewhere. But she hadn't been there when Dad couldn't button his shirt. She hadn't cleaned his IV line or driven him to speech therapy 3 times a week. I had. Still, I never fought her. I thought time would soften her. I was wrong. As Dad improved, Rachel started visiting more often. Not to help, but to observe. She brought spreadsheets and consultants, proposed optimization strategies that felt more like corporate takeovers than family business planning. And Mom, always the diplomat, started echoing Rachel's ideas. Maybe it's time we talk about transitioning leadership, she'd say at dinner. Claire, you've been wonderful, but you don't want to be stuck here forever, do you? Every time I countered, I was met with that same look, like I was being emotional, irrational, ungrateful. But I kept the company running. I built trust with clients. I restructured our debt. And for the first time in years, Harper & Daughters was profitable again. Even the crew said they hadn't felt this kind of stability in ages. But none of that seemed to matter. Not to Rachel, not to Mom. They saw me as temporary, a placeholder. And last week, I found a legal envelope in Dad's study addressed to Rachel, with documents prepared by the family attorney. There were forms for share transfers, witness lines, a draft of a revised will. I didn't confront them. Not yet. I needed more than suspicion. I needed confirmation. And today Lily gave it to me. The party was Rachel's idea. She said it was to celebrate Dad's remarkable recovery, but everything about it felt like a performance. The backyard was strung with warm lights that didn't quite mask the tension in the air. Rachel wore white like she was hosting a bridal shower, and Mom floated from guest to guest with a glass of Chardonnay, smiling too hard. I stayed near Dad, seated in a shaded area, with a blanket across his legs. He couldn't speak easily, but he watched everything, his eyes still sharp, still seeing. I noticed how he glanced at Rachel, how his gaze lingered when she laughed too loudly, or hovered over him too long. He wasn't comfortable either. I poured him lemonade and sat beside him whispering updates about a recent roofing project and a new client who'd asked for a quote. He smiled slightly and gave a slow nod, his fingers tapping against the armrest in approval. Then Lily approached. She'd been chasing Bubbles with the neighbor kids, her pink dress damp from the lawn sprinklers. She leaned in sticky hands on my shoulder and whispered those words. "Aunt Claire, Mom and Grandma are going to take everything from you tonight." I froze, barely breathing. She pulled back, eyes wide but calm, and ran back toward the other children without another word. I scanned the yard. Rachel was deep in conversation with our old accountant, a man she'd once called a retired relic. Mom stood near the drink table, speaking to a younger man I didn't recognize, maybe a junior associate from the law firm she kept mentioning. My heart pounded, but my face stayed neutral. I helped Dad finish his drink, then excused myself inside. Upstairs in my room, I opened my laptop and checked the folder I'd created 3 days earlier just in case. It was labeled Contingency. Inside were screenshots of emails, a copy of Dad's signed share agreement, photos of the documents I'd found in his study, and a voice recording I'd secretly captured of Rachel and Mom arguing in the kitchen the week before. Rachel had said she thinks she earned those shares just because she played nurse. She doesn't have the vision to run this company long term. Mom had replied, "Just be patient. One more signature and we'll clean up the books." I hadn't planned to use any of it. I'd hoped I was wrong, but Lily's words shattered that illusion. I sent a text to Julia, a friend from college who worked as an estate lawyer in Dallas. "Need urgent review of some documents, family matter. Can you call me in 30? She replied in 3 minutes. Absolutely. Back downstairs, the party continued. I rejoined the group, keeping close to Dad, whose eyes seemed to study me more than usual. At one point, he squeezed my hand. I looked at him. "I'm okay," I whispered. He didn't nod, but his hand didn't let go. That evening, after most guests left and dusk settled into a deep orange sky, Rachel gathered us in the living room. Just the family, me, Mom, Rachel, Lily, and Dad in his chair. "There's something we'd like to discuss," Rachel said, her tone formal. She produced a sleek leather folder and opened it slowly. Mom gave me a quick smile, too sweet. "Claire, honey," she began, "this is just a small adjustment to make sure things are structured properly moving forward. For your benefit, really." I said nothing. Rachel continued. "We had the documents reviewed and updated to reflect a more balanced approach to ownership. Since Dad's health is still uncertain, we felt it would be wise to reallocate shares to someone with strategic experience, meaning her." She laid the first page on the table, then the second. "It's all standard. We'll just need signatures from you and Dad. Nothing changes day to day." I looked at the papers without touching them. "Did Dad agree to this?" I asked quietly. Rachel answered too quickly. "We discussed it. He knows it's best for the company." I turned to Mom. "And you think I'm not capable?" Her eyes dropped. "Sweetheart, you've done more than we ever expected. But this isn't personal. It's just practical." That was when I knew. They had already decided I was expendable, just a temporary caretaker. Tonight they planned to erase me, but they weren't ready for what I had in motion. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I simply stood, excused myself to the kitchen, and texted Julia one word: "Now." Within seconds, my phone rang. I answered in a low voice. "You read the documents I asked?" "Yes," she said. "And Claire, they're not just trying to reallocate shares. They're laying the groundwork to prove you're unfit to manage your stake. There's language about mental health instability. It's subtle, but clear enough to raise red flags with a court if they push for conservatorship. My stomach turned. They're using my medical history. They're suggesting past vulnerability. Combined with Dad's condition, they want control of everything. What can I do? I asked. You already did it, Julia replied. You have proof of your ownership. You have records of management payroll operations all under your name. And if you really have recordings, you're in a stronger position than they are. But Claire, if they get Dad to sign tonight, it'll take time and money to unwind it. I hung up, cold clarity washing over me. They weren't just underestimating me. They were actively planning to erase me. I returned to the living room where Rachel was still explaining the documents to Mom as if I weren't present. Dad sat quietly watching all of us with a tired gaze. I'd like to take these to my lawyer, I said calmly. Rachel blinked. There's no need. It's boilerplate. Still, I said, picking up the folder, I'll get back to you. Rachel reached to stop me, but I stepped back. Claire, Mom warned gently, don't be dramatic, we're a family. I met her eyes. Then you'll understand why I'm not signing anything tonight. I went upstairs and locked the door. The folder lay on the bed. I pulled out my scanner and digitized every page, uploading them to Julia with a timestamp. Then I opened my own folder of documentation. I had been preparing this quietly for weeks. Bank statements showing my control of the business account, emails confirming my managerial role, and text messages from Dad, expressing gratitude and intent to transition full leadership to me when his health allowed. But my strongest weapon was the recording. I plugged in my external mic and replayed the kitchen conversation. Rachel's voice sharp and bitter. She's emotionally unstable. You know that. One panic attack, and she folds. I'll handle the company. Mom, we need to make sure she doesn't get in the way. I'd edited it for clarity and sent a copy to a private backup account. I wasn't going to use it immediately, but its existence gave me power. Downstairs, I heard footsteps. Rachel pacing Mom, speaking in hushed tones. I could picture their frustration. I had broken the script. I stayed upstairs until lights dimmed. When I came down, Dad was asleep in his chair. Rachel and Mom had retreated. Only Lily remained curled up on the couch with a book. She looked up when I entered. Are you okay? She asked. I nodded. Thanks to you. She offered a shy smile. I didn't want them to hurt you. I sat beside her. You're very brave, Lily. You know that. She shrugged. You listen to me. They don't. That simple sentence shattered something in me. I reached over and hugged her tightly. No matter what happens, I'll make sure you're safe. I promise. The next morning, I rose early. I had calls to make quietly, systematically. I called Julia and scheduled a formal review with her office in Dallas. I called a local notary I trusted from one of our construction deals and asked if she was available that afternoon. I called Steve Morales, our longest-standing foreman, and invited him for lunch. Need to talk about some changes, I said. Your input matters. Then I drove to the office, arriving before anyone else. I printed out copies of key records, my ownership certificate, staff memos, project reports under my name. I organized everything into folders. At noon, Steve arrived, a big man with hands like lumber and a laugh like gravel. He sat across from me, sensing the seriousness. Something's coming, he said. Rachel's been asking questions. I nodded. She wants control, but I'm not letting her take what we built. You've got the crew, he said. They'd follow you into a burning house. I hope it doesn't come to that, I said. But I might need your statement confirming I've been leading operations, managing payroll, safety, everything. You got it, he said. No hesitation. Back home, I found Rachel waiting in the driveway. She stepped in front of my car before I could park. I rolled down the window. We need to talk, she said, jaw tight. Tomorrow, I said, with my lawyer. Her face twisted. Don't do this, you'll regret it. I smiled. We'll see. That night, I barely slept. Not out of fear. My fear had already burned out and hardened into focus. I spent the early hours rehearsing, replaying every potential question, every tactic Rachel might try. I knew her methods. She didn't scream or throw fits. She played polished, poised, persuasive. She made you feel small with smiles. At exactly 9:45 the next morning, the notary arrived Deborah Klein, a no-nonsense woman who'd notarized hundreds of contracts during her 20 years in construction. "Claire, good to see you again," she said, stepping into the kitchen. "This about the company, sort of," I said, handing her coffee. "You'll see." 15 minutes later, Julia arrived. She'd driven from Dallas calm and precise in a navy pantsuit and heels that echoed power. "You ready for this?" she asked as she sat beside me. "More than ever," I said. At exactly 10:00 a.m., the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Rachel and Mom standing side by side, both in tailored clothes, and wearing that artificial warmth they use like a weapon. "Morning," Rachel said, stepping in without waiting for permission. "We brought the updated documents. Thought we could get it all finalized." "Perfect timing," I said. "Come on in." They both hesitated slightly when they saw Julia and Deborah at the dining room table. "Who are they?" Rachel asked, her voice already cooling. "Legal counsel and a notary," I said. "You said this was just standard paperwork. I figured you wouldn't mind making it official." Rachel glanced at Mom. "We thought this would be more of a family conversation." "And I thought I was family," I said evenly. Julia stood. "We've reviewed the documents Rachel submitted. There are significant legal implications, including language, that suggest Claire is not mentally fit to retain ownership. Care to explain?" Mom stepped in quickly. "Now hold on, this is being taken out of context. We were only trying to protect Claire in case of episodes." Episodes, I repeated, my voice flat. "You mean the depression I was treated for 4 years ago, which I've been cleared from? You mean the stress-induced panic attack I had after working 70-hour weeks to keep the company afloat while Rachel was living in a high-rise in Houston?" Rachel's jaw clenched. "You're twisting things." "Am I?" I reached into the folder on the table and slid the notarized ownership certificate across to Deborah. "Can you confirm this is legitimate?" Deborah adjusted her glasses. "Stamped, signed, sealed. Claire holds 50% of Harper and Daughters. There is no legal basis to override her authority without evidence of current medical incompetency." Julia leaned forward. "And we have no such evidence. What we do have is a series of communications suggesting coordinated efforts to misrepresent her capacity. You can't prove that Rachel snapped." "Actually, we can," I said, and pulled out the USB drive. "You remember last week kitchen conversation? The one where you said I fold under pressure and Mom said I shouldn't get in the way?" Mom's face drained of color. "You recorded us. I protected myself," I said. I plugged the drive into my laptop and Rachel lunged forward. "Don't you dare!" Julia blocked her with one arm as the audio played. Rachel's voice smug and confident. "She thinks she earned those shares just because she played nurse. She doesn't have the vision." "Then, Mom, just one more signature and we'll clean it up." Silence filled the room after the clip ended. Julia turned to Deborah. "Would you consider that evidence of coercion or intent to defraud?" Deborah looked between them. "If I were asked to testify, yes." I faced my mother. "You always taught us to earn what we wanted, but you tried to steal. And Rachel, you could have worked beside me. We could have done this together, but you wanted all of it." Rachel's voice trembled with rage. "This company was supposed to be mine. You were the one who ran off to play with color palettes and rich clients. I stayed. I studied. I sacrificed." "You vanished," I interrupted. "You left when it got hard, and now that it's worth something again, you came back to collect. You're not fit to run a company," she spat. "You're emotional." "I'm human," I said. "And unfortunately for you, I'm prepared." I turned to Julia. "Let's proceed." Julia opened a new folder and laid out documents, one reaffirming my ownership, another blocking any unauthorized changes to the company structure, and a letter formally requesting an internal audit of all financial activity handled by Rachel over the past year. "What is this?" Rachel asked, eyes wide. "You're auditing me. I'm protecting the company," I said, "which you clearly can't be trusted to do." "This is revenge," Mom hissed. "This is self-respect," I answered. Deborah notarized each page as Julia slid them across. "You'll receive official copies by certified mail. Effective immediately, Rachel is removed from financial oversight. Any further decisions will require unanimous consent between shareholders." Rachel stood, fists clenched. "You think you've won?" "No," I said calmly. I think I've reclaimed what was mine. She stormed out, Mom trailing behind her, silent for once. Julia exhaled. You handled that with more grace than I would have. I wasn't graceful, I said, closing the folder. I was exact. Deborah nodded. That's how you survive families like this. No, I corrected. That's how you outgrow them. The house was quiet after they left. For a long moment, I just stood there, my hand resting on the back of Dad's chair. He had watched the entire exchange, eyes, sharp jaw clenched. I turned to him slowly. I'm sorry you had to see that, I said. He didn't answer, just lifted his hand slightly and squeezed my fingers. That was enough. Later that afternoon, I emailed the audio file and documentation to the family attorney, the one who'd been quietly complicit in drafting those share transfer papers. I copied Julia, Deborah, and my financial advisor. I wasn't just defending myself anymore, I was making it official. The audit I triggered revealed more than I expected. Rachel had quietly diverted funds consulting fees paid to a shell LLC she had created in Houston. Over $60,000 over the past 12 months. Julia advised me to file for civil fraud. I hesitated. Not because she didn't deserve it, but because I wasn't sure if I could stomach the ugliness of dragging our family name through court. Then I thought of Dad, of the nights I had spoon-fed him soup while Rachel was at a corporate gala. I thought of the time I missed my best friend's wedding because Mom refused to stay home with him while I traveled. I thought of Lily, whose tiny voice had shattered the illusion I'd been clinging to. So I said yes. Let's file. And we did. The summons arrived at Rachel's office 3 days later. Her response was venomous. Accusations flew. She claimed the audio had been manipulated, that I had exploited Dad, that I had faked my recovery and used mental illness to gain sympathy. But none of it stuck. I had records, timestamps, allies. And most importantly, I had a consistent story backed by witnesses' documents and decisions made while she was too busy planning my exit to notice my quiet resistance. When our case reached mediation, her lawyer asked for a private session. He looked exhausted, his tie loosened, and eyes bloodshot. My client is willing to resign from any future role in Harper and Daughters, he said, in exchange for dropping the charges. I didn't answer immediately. I looked out the window where the city skyline gleamed under late morning sun. Then I looked him straight in the eyes. And Lily. He blinked. Excuse me, her daughter. If Rachel walks away clean, Lily stays under her roof. I want assurance that she gets the support she needs. Therapy education. A neutral guardian to monitor her welfare. He hesitated. That's a lot to ask. Then she goes to court, I said, and everything we have goes public. Within hours, we had an agreement. Rachel forfeited all future financial claims to the company. The court appointed a guardian ad litem to monitor Lily's well-being. Rachel would retain custody for now, but any sign of neglect or manipulation would trigger intervention. When I walked out of the mediation building, the air felt different, heavier, maybe but clearer. I drove straight to the office, sat at my desk, and stared at the company logo on the glass door, Harper and Daughters. It used to sting. The plural, the implication that Rachel and I were equals in this. But not anymore. I'd earned the right to carry that name. I hadn't stolen it. I had preserved it. That evening, I sat with Dad on the back porch. He was bundled in a blanket, his tea warm in hand. The sunset painted his face gold. You okay? I asked. He gave a tiny nod. Then in a low, broken voice, he whispered, You did good, kid. My throat tightened. I hadn't heard him speak that clearly in weeks. You knew, I said. Didn't you? His eyes sparkled. Always. I leaned against his shoulder like I used to when I was small. For the first time in years, I felt anchored, safe. The next morning, I met with the board and formally assumed the role of interim CEO. It wasn't a title I dreamed of, but it was mine now, earned, not given. And under my leadership, Harper and Daughters would do more than build houses. We'd build legacies, real ones. I also created a new fund, the Lily Initiative. 10% of company profits would go to supporting young girls in unstable households access to therapy, mentorship, education. It was my quiet promise to Lily and to the girl I used to be. Rachel left town 2 weeks later. Mom tried to call once. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. Some people apologize to ease their conscience, not to repair the damage. I had no room left for hollow reconciliation. My family wasn't gone. It had just been trimmed to size. Me, Dad, and Lily. That was enough. We weren't perfect, but we were honest, and honesty is more powerful than blood. Months passed, the legal dust settled, but the emotional debris lingered. I saw it in Dad's eyes when he stared out the window too long, and I felt it in my own chest when I walked past the room that used to be Rachel's. Grief comes in strange shapes. It isn't always about death. Sometimes it's the slow erosion of trust, the kind that carves canyons in your soul. But we adapted. Harper and Daughters expanded. We took on larger contracts, updated our equipment, and hired 3 new site managers, 2 of them, women, both single moms, trying to make their way in a world that rarely made room for them. I sat in on every interview. I asked about their goals, not just their experience. I wanted to build something different, not just profitable, but purposeful. Lily visited often. Rachel had honored the agreement so far, partly out of fear maybe, but also I think out of a grudging realization that she had lost the moral high ground. Lily loved weekends at our house. She helped Dad water the plants, shadowed me at the office, and once drew a blueprint of a treehouse she wanted to build in our backyard. "Can we actually do it?" she asked, eyes wide. "We can do anything we draw," I said. And we did. It wasn't fancy, just plywood and rope painted white, but it stood tall, with a sign over the entrance that read, "Claire's Crew Only." One afternoon, as we sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the cedar trees, Lily turned to me and said, "You know I told you because I heard Mom say you were weak." My heart skipped. She said I was weak. Lily nodded. But I knew she was wrong. Because when you tuck me in, you never forget to ask how my day was. And when I cry, you wait until I'm done, instead of telling me to stop. That's not weak. That's strong. I didn't speak for a while. I just held her hand and watched the light shift over her face. Children notice everything. They see past titles and bank accounts and perfectly rehearsed smiles. They see truth, and she had seen mine. The next morning, I updated my will. Everything I had would go to Lily under the protection of a trust until she turned 25. Education, therapy, travel, a down payment for a home. Not because I owed her, but because she reminded me who I was when I had nearly forgotten. Some nights I still thought of Rachel, of Mom, not with anger, not even sadness, but with a strange kind of detachment, like remembering a movie I used to love before I realized how flawed the ending was. There's a kind of peace in choosing not to engage, in accepting that some people will never admit what they did, because doing so would shatter the story they tell themselves to sleep at night. But I didn't need their apology. I had clarity. I had control. And most importantly, I had rebuilt something they tried to take my dignity. They underestimated me because I didn't fight loud, because I cried in private and wore soft sweaters and cooked when I was anxious. But what they didn't understand was that softness isn't weakness. It's precision. It's choosing the exact moment to strike with facts instead of fury. It's documenting, preparing, building a quiet fortress until the day comes when you need to stand inside it and say no more. I never wanted revenge. I wanted respect. And if I couldn't get it from them, I would give it to myself. Every day. With every decision, with every contract I signed, every young woman I hired, every child I showed how to swing a hammer. This was how we changed the legacy, not by burning it all down, but by claiming the blueprints and rebuilding it brick by brick on our own terms. And that, I think, is what justice really looks like.